Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out the HD version of Samurai Warriors 2 that only ever came out in Japan. Because yes, this is actually a thing. This is a full-on port from the PlayStation 2 or Xbox 360. I couldn't tell you which one, although I think it might not actually be a port in that sense. I think they may have just taken the content from Samurai Warriors 2 and moved it over into the engine of the Samurai Warriors games that they have on Vita, or should I say like the Dynasty Warriors ones. Just the same general Omega Force engine, but other than that, yeah, it's pretty much just a remaster, more or less. They have it all in the new engine, and you can play all of the individual modes, which I am going through one by one here, in a sort of going down the list fashion, because this is actually post-commentary. And I don't have too much to say about this one, because, well, I didn't play that much of it. I played a little bit of the PlayStation 2 version a few years back, so this all seems okay. So I might as well just talk about how the Vita version looks and runs, and you're about to find out, because we're going to be playing a story mode stage with what's-her-face here. I never remember any of the characters. I know I play as Yukimura Sanada, or Sanada Yukimura, however you pronounce that, or order that, I should say. I play as him later on, and I know what Oda Nobunaga looks like, because he's always the most intimidating looking motherfucker in the room. Even in games like Sengoku Basara, that's true, so yeah. Nevertheless, we are going to go and hop into the story stage with this lady here. I'm going through all the menus and stuff just to give you a quick look at them before I back out, but this video is an hour long, even with my general quicker pace on everything. It's a little silly, but thankfully the game's not too hard to figure out when it's in Japanese, and there's also the benefit that it's basically exactly the same as it was back on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360. So you can go and look up some old walkthroughs for the original games as well, and get an idea of what you're doing, which is actually a really nice little thing to be able to do. I did that like once or twice. I didn't need to do it much more than that, but still. Game's got plenty of things to see and do. It's got like 5 individual modes, and your characters maintain their levels across all of them, except like the, what do they call it? Sengoku Sugoroku? Where it's completely irrelevant what level you are. But nevertheless, let's talk about the actual game. It is Samurai Warriors 2, and therefore it is actually a fair bit older and a fair bit clunkier than the original games. I'll go over the gameplay mechanics real quick. You still got your square and your triangle attacks, which is your light and your heavy stuff. You have the ability to jump. You have a Musou attack, which you can use when the bar is completely full. And in most cases that I found, it will stun all the enemies around you so that you can get a few good hits in on them. You can also carry along a bodyguard, which you can level up independently and you can buy in multiple different modes. And if you are close to them when you throw off your Musou attack, you will both do one at the same time for some combined damage. You have the ability to block with the L button, which will also reset your camera angle and let you just generally wander around in a sort of a strafey fashion, although pretty much every attack I've tried to block has managed to go through my guard with every character. I don't know if it's a character-specific thing or if it's a skill that you can get. Probably a skill now that I think about it, but still, blocking isn't particularly useful in early game. There's not very much that's useful in early game. You are kind of weak early on, especially with your general attack chains. You only have like 4 attacks. You unlock way more as you level up, but this game makes leveling up a lot slower than I remember it being, I gotta say. So, yeah, if you play on anything higher than the 2nd difficulty level, you will probably get your shit rocked. I played on the 3rd difficulty level, and I got my shit rocked, so there you go. It's back to the old sort of Samurai Warriors, Dynasty Warriors progression, where they expect you to play on the lower difficulties, and then take the levels and the equipment into the higher difficulties, so that you can do better on them. It makes a good amount of sense. I actually miss those progression systems. I don't like how they've done it in the new ones, where it's just like easy, normal, and hard, and it And hard is just so simple, even with the starting equipment. In this game, they actually make it difficult. But anyway, back to the game mechanics I was describing. You have a dodge button in this game, but I found that it's not quite useful because it's very hard to actually keep a good eye on the enemies that you're attacking. There's no lock-on as far as I can tell, so doing an effective dodge is a lot harder than it looks. Combine this with the fact that you have to put in a pretty specific effort in order to actually angle your attacks or your blocks or your dodges the right way. And it makes Samurai Warriors a lot more clunkier and a fair bit more difficult. And there are parts of it I like. I mean, I like it being based on precision, but when the later games have compensated basically by letting you lock on to the enemy characters and then make it relatively more simple instead of having to worry about fiddling around with some relatively imprecise controls, especially since dodge is on a touchscreen button, which is so bizarre. But yeah, I'm a bit of two minds about the whole thing, and I guess if you aren't too fussed about this sort of thing, you'll probably like it. But at the same time, it isn't helped by the fact that the performance of this version of the game is actually kind of horrible. It's clearly trying to hold 30 frames a second, but it can barely do that half the time, and that makes things a lot more difficult, like insanely more difficult to actually make happen, especially when you're surrounded by dudes and they're all trying to attack you. The frame rate can drop like into like 15 or so, which is really bad. This is actually on my hacked Vita, but before all of you complain that I'm a pirate, I actually bought this version years ago when it came out. I just never got around to doing a video on it now, so, you know, that's a thing. But I tried using the overclocking plugin on this, and it didn't work. As far as I can tell, at least it didn't help out that much. The Vita might have already been on the maximum clock speed for this game because, well, that's a thing, but still. On the speed I was most comfortable at putting it at, it just didn't work. Just refused to. So, I mean, there you go. The game's performance is just kind of bad, and that makes it really hard to get used to the controls because they feel even more sluggish than they should. I wonder how the PS3 version of this game runs. I haven't looked it up in particular. It'd be great if that game, or at least that version of it, ran in 60 FPS, because that would make the controls a lot easier to deal with. But anyway, as I was saying, there are some other things you can do. If you hold the R button, you have two special attacks that you can use, R plus square and R plus triangle. For example, with Yukimura Sanada, his two attacks are leaving a trail of fire along the ground that can burn and hurt enemies, and his R plus triangle is to automatically summon his horse, which is kind of funny when you think about it, considering you can do that in pretty much any Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors game past this one as just a default ability. So having it be one of his special abilities is a little shit, I gotta say. But yeah, you've got your weaponry, and they can be upgraded in the usual set of ways. They can have special effects placed on them. They can be modified, and they can be bought and sold. So, you know, I don't think there's a weapon fusing system in this one. I could be wrong. I might not have just stumbled across it just yet. But yeah, the weapons work in relatively the same way. You also have equipable orbs and skills. At least I believe they're orbs, where you can put them on for even more effects, and the skills for yet even more effects, and the skills can actually level up, and you can get new skills at the end of each battle. Unfortunately, you have to do this for every individual character, and it is a money drain, so you will be spending an absolute ton of money to get anywhere, especially considering that you have like 30 to 40 something characters in this game, and they're all leveled and weaponed individually. They're all relatively close to different, but at the same time, it's a Dynasty Warriors, i.e. Samurai Warriors game where, while every character may have a different moveset, their general just gameplay feels somewhat similar, especially since their square and triangle chains tend to work in the same way. You just generally throw them out and hope for the best. Admittedly, the special moves do help diversify things a little bit, but I mean, I've been playing a lot of Sengoku Basara 4 recently, which really does make an effort to individualize every single individual character in that game. So coming back to this, where every character plays relatively similarly, they just have one or two special moves every now and again, it's a bit of a downgrade, but then again, I am talking about a game that's like 10 years away from this one, but I'm just saying, that's how I'm kind of been looking at this game, which means I'm not really that impressed, all things considered, but I mean, there you go. Ding, ding. Bloody phone going off at the worst possible times, nevertheless. So yeah, might as well talk about the individual modes in this game. So, we're playing through the story mode right now. Every character has their own individual story mode, which has like 5 or 6 stages, each with their own individual story being followed through them. Then you have the mercenary mode, which is a sort of... It's a sort of easy way to level. It's definitely the fastest way to level in the game, where you take over as a sort of mercenary for the individual warlords, and you have to pick a mission pretty much every time. The missions are shorter than the story mode levels, and they generally involve things like protecting someone, attacking the enemy lord, just general simple objectives like that, and you can do all the same sort of stuff you do in the story mode, like buying and upgrading weapons, upgrading skills, yada 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 yada. And you go through, you look for specific goals to do in order to unlock special swords, and hope to eventually unify the land. Same thing as the story mode. Then you have the survival mode, which is kind of similar. You go through 5 floors of combat at a time, and you can pay to get special objectives. And if you make it through these special objectives, you'll usually get a bunch of extra gold. But the thing about this mode is that you level up really slowly in it, so I don't feel the need to go back and play that one anywhere near as much as I do the other modes, because it just doesn't seem like I'm making that much progress. It seems like it's mainly meant for characters that are already leveled up, which is kind of a pain in the ass, considering you'd hope to get a little bit more variety by swapping between characters a lot. But I mean, there you go. You do also have a free mode, which lets you pick a character, a stage, and just lets you go at it, more or less. So that's a nice thing to have. And you also have the Sengoku Sugoroku mode, which, well, I know it's not based off Itadaki Street, also known as Fortune Street, but when I saw it, my first thought was, oh, this looks a lot like Fortune's. Fuck's sake, phone, Jesus. When I first played it, I thought, that looks a lot like Itadaki Street, and the rules are actually very similar, but I'm willing to bet it's because Sugoroku is actually an ancient Japanese board game, and Itadaki Street was probably based off that. The rules in it are pretty simple. You just have to get as much money as possible by buying up territories, trying to get territories as close as possible to each other so that they all increase in value, and the idea of making enemies land on your territories in order to make them pay up. I play a little bit of the mode in this video, but the main problem with it is that it has this intensely repetitive soundtrack going back through it, and it's one of those things that'll get in your head and stay there, which is why I'm watching this video on 0% volume, because holy shit, I cannot deal with that right now. It is so bad. I stuck with it as long as I could. There are some breaks in the gameplay, like if you make the attempt to forcefully take over someone else's territory, they will drop you into a minigame, which usually involves like defeating as many enemies as possible, breaking as many rocks as possible, exposing as many like dudes in the ground as possible, but those are quite rare. It takes usually a bit into the game to actually get that stuff to happen regularly, and I could not be bothered. There are also a couple of other things that can happen in the game, like every time you land on a shrine, you have to roll 2 dice, and depending on the results of the dice, there is a random effect. So the one I got in the video footage that you will see is everyone gets on the same space. That seems to be the effect that I got. I also tried to do it twice because I was trying to turn off the explanations of everything, but for some reason the lady just feels the need to explain everything to you, and I think I just like swapped the game's map. It wouldn't be too bad of a mode if it wasn't only one player. You see, on the console versions you can play with up to 4 people, but on this version of the game you can only play it as 1 player, mainly because the minigames basically pull you back down to Samurai Warriors combat in split screen, which is a little bizarre in a handheld form like this, but hey, it does do at least a relatively decent job of that mode. But again, it's the music, the long-winded explanations, and the fact that the AI takes ages to take its turn. I like the fact that the AI actually does differ depending on the character that you're playing. It's kind of it's a nice touch. So people like Oda Nobunaga will be like rank S AI, which is kind of neat. But well, that's a thing. It just takes ages. That's the main problem with it. It takes ages for all the AI to do their moves. It takes ages for the explanations to go through. It takes ages for just anything to bloody happen. And it's kind of frustrating to actually play because of that. I mean, Itadaki Street takes ages to play as well. I know that much, but I mean, it's still kind of frustrating at the end of the day. The final thing, there is some online co-op, or not online co-op, I should say ad hoc co-op, but I didn't get the opportunity to try that because, as always, I am forever alone. There is also your general galleries where you can look up your individual dude's stats and all that. You can look up the individual histories of each character they included in the game. All of that sort of stuff that they usually include in the Samurai Warriors games, and that's all perfectly fine. That's all enjoyable enough. Except it's all in Japanese, so I couldn't read a single word of it. So the game's a fully fledged package, and I should also mention that they did the same sort of I should also mention that they gave the same HD treatment to Samurai Warriors 2 Empires, which is by far my favorite part of the collection, because after playing a fair few Samurai Warriors and Dynasty Warriors Empire games, the Samurai Warriors 2 Empires iteration is probably my favorite for being the most, well, basically just the one that feels the best after a few hours of play. I wish I had more opportunities to play it, but of course I don't, because my schedule is always packed to the bloody brim. With that said, though, would I recommend this version of the game? Well, I don't think I can, for multiple reasons, mainly due to the performance. It doesn't run that well, and it's not that satisfying. I mean, the game's an older Samurai Warriors game, so it's always going to be a bit rough around the edges, you know? And I'm trying to take that all into mind. But being rough around the edges combined with the game's overall shoddy performance makes it just kind of annoying and a bit of a drag to play in the long run. And that's what's disappointing about it to me, that I wish they could have made it perform better. Even if it meant like dropping the resolution or something to make it just run that little bit faster, then it would have been way more enjoyable to me. But with the performance the way it is, I might as well just go play the PlayStation 2 version on PC SX2 and see if they have like an overclocking mod or something like that to make the performance better on that, because otherwise there doesn't seem to be that much difference between that version and this version isn't in English. I mean, sure, I have to put up with the terrible English voice acting, but it's Dynasty Warriors. It's always going to have terrible English voice acting up until the PlayStation 3 era, at least. To give you an idea, the first Dynasty Warriors game I actually played was Dynasty Warriors 8, and that was back when it was new. So, yeah. Just saying, man. Just saying. It's not terrible, but honestly, I have a hard time recommending it over any of the other Dynasty Warriors games, and while I wish it would have came out in English just to make it a little bit easier to play Samurai Warriors 2, I can kind of understand why they didn't, because there were a ton of Warriors games, just in general, coming out on Vita around the time this HD port came out. I think this HD port actually came out the same time that Samurai Warriors 4 did. And you know what, just to be sure about that, let me go look that up, because I'm positive that they came out at roughly the same time, but I'll just go and make sure. The wiki should be able to tell me. Okay, so they came out in 2013, and oh wow, it actually came out a full year before Samurai Warriors 4. That's kind of strange, actually, but I mean, there you go. So Well, I mean, either way, we were still getting a ridiculous amount of Samurai Warriors games after this point. Hell, even Dynasty Warriors Next, which came out at launch, while not being as advanced in the gameplay side of things, was still a bit more technologically solid than this port was. So I can imagine this port coming out on the English stores and people just ignoring it entirely, although there was a PlayStation 3 version of this port and it never actually came out in North America or Europe either, which is a little odd. I gotta say, just a tiny bit weird, but, well, I couldn't give you an answer as to why I did it. I'm honestly not sure. That's just a thing. Then again, they might have been discouraged by the bad performance of Samurai Warriors 3. Actually, I'm curious. When did Samurai Warriors 3 come out? 2010. I do not know my dates. I do not know my dates at all. That is kind of silly. Good lord. Never mind, but yeah. Imagine this coming out and then having like Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends Complete Edition and Dynasty Warriors Next and possibly even like Shin Gundam Musou. Like that didn't come out here either, but imagine this version standing up next to those 3 games and think to yourself, would this have really been appreciated? And the answer is probably not. But yeah. Oh well. It's okay. It's fine, but, I mean, there are other versions of Samurai Warriors 2 to play that will probably run relatively control and relatively play better than this one, so no thanks. I'm just disappointed, that's all. I'm gonna let the rest of this footage play out because seriously, it's a bloody hour long because I went through everything just to make sure it was comprehensive. But, yeah. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.
ございます。 取ったり。 品がたくさんあり。
柴田が国の魂見せてやろう。
本当は切り合いたいな。
行動をしくべく奮戦せんなんてな。
本当は切り合いたいな。
天下無双の戦に前田慶次水産。天下に武を敷く、それが世の望み。剣の極意極めてやるぜ。
さてと、僕の番だね。
才は投げられん。
さてと僕の番だね。
俺の剣さばき見てビビんなよ。
さてと僕の番だね。
さあかぶくぜ。盛り上がってきたぜ。サイは投げられん。